What would you do if your child was smarter than everyone you know, including you? It was a cloudy Tuesday morning when the world changed forever. Somewhere in a cramped classroom in Austin, Texas, a fifth grader was casually rewriting the laws of quantum physics, with a blue Crayola marker and a few sheets of notebook paper. But this story doesn't begin in a lab or on a rocket launch pad. It begins with a single viral video, a boy with too much brain for his age, and a man who redefined possibility. The footage was shaky, recorded vertically on a cheap Android phone. In it, a young boy with messy brown hair and oversized glasses stood beside a homemade science project built entirely from salvaged electronics and parts from an old microwave. His voice cracked slightly as he explained the concept. "I'm using magnetically confined plasma to simulate a mini fusion reaction. If I can stabilize the field, I'll be able to produce clean energy using only salt water and copper wire." The camera zoomed in on a glowing orb, levitating midair inside a glass chamber. "He's 10, the caption read. 10. By the time the sun set that evening, the video had over 12 million views on X, formerly Twitter. It was everywhere: TikTok, Reddit, YouTube, morning talk shows. Celebrities reacted. Scientists commented. Journalists called it fake, until MIT confirmed the principles behind the project were sound. And in the penthouse of a SpaceX facility in Hawthorne, California, Elon Musk blinked at the screen and whispered, "Who is this kid?" A few hours earlier, in the modest Carter family apartment, Aiden had no idea he was about to become the most sought-after genius in the world. He was still wearing his dusty Vans, sipping watered-down orange juice, and arguing with his mom about whether he could skip school, just this once. "Aiden, I don't care if you invented a robot that makes grilled cheese from solar flares," his mother snapped. "You're going to school. Period." "But, Mom," he groaned, "I've already read the 8th grade curriculum." "Then you'll have time to daydream like all the other geniuses," she shot back with a tired smile. What Aiden didn't know was that his life had just split in two, the before and the after. The email hit Elon's inbox around noon. Subject: 10-year-old with functioning fusion model, urgent. From Jared K., SpaceX Data Intelligence. "Sir, the device in the video is legitimate. Our engineers cross-referenced the plasma behavior with Lab 3's prototype from last year. The kid either had access to confidential blueprints, or he reverse-engineered it from scratch. Either way, we need to talk to him. Fast." Elon leaned back in his chair, staring at the still image of Aiden standing beside his creation. The kid had that look in his eyes, like he saw through things. Like he knew something you didn't. A look Elon himself used to have, before the world nearly squeezed it out of him. He hit reply. "Find him. Get his parents' info. I want to meet this kid." A few hours later, while Aiden sat in class doodling a schematic for a magnetic turbine inside the margin of his spelling worksheet, his mom's phone rang. She was elbow-deep in hospital paperwork, halfway through a double shift. "Hi, this is Rachel Carter," she said, brushing hair from her forehead. "Ms. Carter," the voice on the other end said calmly, "this is Erica from Tesla Executive Relations. Mr. Elon Musk would like to schedule a meeting with you and your son." She almost dropped her phone. "I'm sorry, what?" Cut back to Elon Musk's office. He paced while watching the clip again, pausing at the boy's exact words. "If I can stabilize the field, I'll be able to produce clean energy." He turned to his assistant. "Do you realize what this means? If he's even half right, he just leapfrogged 10 years of R&D. And he's what, 4 feet tall?" Elon wasn't just impressed. He was shaken. For a man used to being the smartest person in any room, this felt different. He pulled up a live satellite feed and watched the small Texas school from orbit. "We may be looking at the most important human mind in the last century," he murmured. Meanwhile, in the Carter apartment, chaos. "Mom, you don't understand," Aiden said, practically vibrating. "He's the reason I even know what renewable orbital acceleration is." If Elon Musk wants to talk to me, I have to go. He's a billionaire, Rachel said warily. You think he doesn't have an angle? What if he believes in me? Aiden replied quietly. What if he's the only one who does? Rachel stared at her son. He looked so small, but so awake. Not like a child. Like something else. She made the call. The next day, the story hit every major outlet. 10-year-old genius gets call from Elon Musk. The smartest kid alive may have solved energy crisis. Twitter explodes over mini Einstein. And just like that, a boy from a working-class home with no father, no mentor, and no PhDs in the family, was about to sit across from the most famous visionary on Earth. The internet couldn't get enough. Reactions poured in. This is the plot of a Netflix show, right? Musk found his successor. We just witnessed the origin story of the next Elon. Or maybe someone bigger. But behind the headlines and hashtags, no one saw the storm brewing. Because the question wasn't whether Aiden Carter was a genius. It was what the world would do to a genius this young. And what Elon Musk might become once he met someone who could outthink even him. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? If you ask Rachel Carter when she first knew her son was different, she won't say it was when he started reading at 2, or when he corrected her algebra at 4, or even when he built a homemade gyroscope using coat hangers and an old blender. She'll tell you it was the time she found him crying at the kitchen table, not because he was sad, but because he realized time was relative and no one else in his class understood it. I just don't get it, Mom, he had said through tears. Why can't people see it? It's right there. That was Aiden Carter at age 6. Aiden wasn't born into brilliance. He was born into bills. His mom worked 2 nursing jobs just to keep the lights on in their 2-bedroom apartment in East Austin. His father? Gone before his 2nd birthday. He said he wasn't cut out to raise a computer, Rachel would mutter whenever someone asked. They lived in a neighborhood where the streetlights flickered and the ice cream truck was often louder than the sirens. It wasn't exactly a hotbed for intellectual development. But Aiden didn't care about basketball or video games or TikTok challenges. His heart beat to a different rhythm. While other kids played tag, he solved puzzles meant for PhD candidates. While his peers doodled stick figures, Aiden sketched complex wave functions and designed propulsion systems in the margins of his school worksheets. It wasn't that he tried to be different. It's that he couldn't be anything else. By 3rd grade, he'd finished high school math. By 4th, he was programming in 5 languages. By 5th, he had already drafted a theoretical model for interdimensional communication. The teachers didn't know what to do with him. He finishes every assignment in 5 minutes, one said. He corrects me in front of the class, another complained. He needs a specialist, the principal suggested. But Rachel couldn't afford specialists. And Aiden didn't need therapy, he needed stimulation. Real challenge. Real purpose. And maybe, someone who understood. There was only one person in Aiden's world who got it, his mom. Rachel Carter wasn't a scientist. She didn't have a degree in physics or math. But she had grit, and she listened. Even when she didn't understand the formulas, she understood the feeling. The hunger in her son's voice when he talked about wormholes or negative mass. He's not trying to be smarter, she'd say. He's trying to make sense of a world that's too slow for him. She made flashcards with quantum mechanics terms. She watched MIT lectures on YouTube during her breaks. She read to him every night, even when he corrected her pronunciation of Bose-Einstein condensate. At school, though, Aiden was isolated. Gifted kids get celebrated in movies. In real life, they get left behind. He wasn't invited to birthday parties. Teachers thought he was a show-off. Other kids called him Robo-Brain and whispered that he was probably an alien. Sometimes, Aiden believed them. He'd go days without speaking in class, lost in thought while others recited vocabulary lists. He once told a counselor that the world felt like it was moving at 0.25x speed, and he was stuck on fast forward. The only place he felt alive was when he was building. Inventing. And that's exactly what he did. In their cramped garage, amid the rusted bikes and cardboard boxes, Aiden created a workshop. Using discarded tech from local pawn shops, broken appliances neighbors threw away, and components he ordered online using a debit card his mom didn't know he had, Aiden turned junk into genius. His proudest creation? A stabilized mini-fusion reaction core built from microwave parts, a fish tank, and a hacked Arduino. It didn't really create energy, not yet, but the principles behind it were solid. Groundbreaking, even. The science fair judges didn't know what to make of it. They gave him third place, for safety reasons. But someone in the audience recorded the moment he explained it. That video changed everything. When the clip went viral, Aiden didn't even know. He was too busy trying to simulate gravitational lensing using marbles and curved glass. It wasn't until a classmate blurted out, "Yo, Carter, you're famous or something," that he even opened the internet. 12.7 million views. Hundreds of thousands of shares. Reactions from celebrities. Physicists tagging each other, "Can someone verify this?" And then came the email, a message from Tesla Executive Relations. Subject line, Aiden, opportunity to connect with Elon Musk. His hands trembled. His heart raced. He whispered to himself, "No way." That night, Rachel made grilled cheese and soup. The lights flickered again as they ate in silence. Aiden stared at his food, barely touching it. "Mom," he finally said. "What if this is it?" "What's it, baby?" The moment everything changes. Forever. She reached across the table and held his hand. "Then promise me one thing," she said softly. "No matter what happens next, don't let them take your soul." Aiden looked into her eyes and nodded. Even then, he had no idea just how hard that promise would be to keep. The next morning, the world waited for Elon Musk's reply. But Aiden had already decided. If the man who built rockets wanted to talk, then maybe, just maybe, this boy who dreamed of the stars would finally find someone who spoke his language. He wasn't just a prodigy anymore. He was a name the world would never forget. There's a kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being left out, but from being miles ahead of everyone else. That was Aiden Carter's world, day in and day out. While his classmates giggled over TikTok dances and obsessed over Pokemon cards, Aiden's mind was chasing particles at light speed, calculating how time dilates near a black hole. He didn't try to be alone. He just was. Not by choice, but by design. At school, he walked the halls like a ghost. Not because no one saw him, but because no one understood him. His teachers were overworked, underpaid, and increasingly intimidated by a 10-year-old who casually corrected their science lessons. "Actually, the speed of light is a constant only in a vacuum," Aiden once said, raising his hand mid-lecture. "But in mediums like water or glass, it slows down depending on the refractive index." "You skipped that part." The room went silent. His teacher forced a smile. "Well, we'll cover that in high school." Aiden lowered his hand. He wouldn't raise it again for weeks. At recess, he sat alone under a tree, sketching propulsion systems in his notebook. The other kids didn't bully him anymore, not because they stopped wanting to, but because they didn't know how to. What do you say to someone who looks like a kid but thinks like a machine? They whispered about him. They dared each other to touch his backpack. One boy once said he was probably a government robot. "I bet if you cut him open, there's wires inside." The rumor stuck. At home, it was different, sort of. Rachel tried her best to keep life feeling normal, even when it wasn't. She insisted on chores. He still had to brush his teeth, finish dinner, fold laundry. They had weekly movie nights, where she forced him to put away the textbooks and just be a kid. But even in the darkness of their living room, midway through The Incredibles, Aiden would suddenly blurt out. "Do you think gravity is just a byproduct of quantum entanglement?" Rachel would sigh, toss a popcorn kernel at him, and say, "I think you need to watch the movie." But in those moments, she saw it in his eyes, the restlessness. He wasn't trying to show off. He wasn't trying to escape. He was searching for someone who spoke his language. His only friend, if you could call it that, was his 76-year-old neighbor, Mr. Gaines, a retired engineer who fought in Vietnam and now spent his days fixing old radios in his garage. Most afternoons, Aiden would ride his bike over after school. Mr. Gaines didn't ask stupid questions. He didn't talk down. And most importantly, he listened. "You're not crazy, kid," he'd say. "You're just early." "Early?" Aiden asked once. "Yeah. Like showing up to a party 10 years too soon. Everyone else is still getting dressed." They'd tinker with circuits and debate wormholes until the sun dipped behind the houses. Mr. Gaines didn't solve Aiden's loneliness, but he dulled the edge of it. But even Gaines couldn't fix what happened inside Aiden's head. Some nights, Aiden would lie in bed with his eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling as equations danced above him in invisible ink. He'd lose sleep wondering if time travel would require reversing entropy or bending brains in higher dimensions. His brain wouldn't shut off. Other nights, he'd wake up from vivid dreams, standing on Mars, floating in vacuum, holding a device no one on Earth had ever seen. Once, he ran to his notebook at 3:17 a.m., scribbled furiously for 20 minutes, then collapsed back into bed. The next morning, he looked at what he'd written. Gravitational resonance via nonlinear feedback loops. Model implies, self-aware energy signature. He didn't even remember writing it. Rachel noticed the dark circles under his eyes. She asked if he was okay. He nodded, lied, smiled. He didn't want to worry her. She was already doing too much. And besides, how do you explain to your mom that your brain feels like it's accelerating, while the rest of the world is stuck in neutral? He didn't want to sound ungrateful. But the truth was hard to ignore. The smarter he got, the lonelier he became. Then came the viral video. Then came that call. Suddenly, everything flipped. Overnight. At school, the same kids who ignored him started whispering his name with awe. "That's the kid Elon Musk wants to meet. I heard he solved clean energy or something. He's probably going to live on the moon." The teachers went from dismissive to wide-eyed. The principal asked for a photo, for the school website. Even his math teacher stopped calling on him, probably afraid of looking dumb. But none of that made Aiden feel less alone. In fact, it made it worse. He didn't want to be a spectacle. He didn't want to be a mascot for intelligence. He just wanted one thing. Someone who saw him not as a miracle, not as a mystery, but as an equal. Rachel watched him closely. Fame looked good on TV, but in real life, it came with pressure. With questions. With grown men in suits knocking on your door asking about your kids' potential. And Aiden could feel it. The shift. The expectation. He wasn't just the smart kid anymore. He was the future. And that's a heavy crown for a boy who still needed step stools to reach the peanut butter. That night, before their flight to California, Aiden stood outside in the backyard, looking up at the stars. Rachel stepped beside him, arms crossed against the chill. "You nervous?" He nodded. "What if I mess up? What if Elon thinks I'm a fraud?" She reached down, took his hand. "Then you'll still be my boy. Just a boy who thought big, and tried anyway." He looked up again. Venus was bright tonight. For a moment, he didn't feel quite so alone. It wasn't supposed to go viral. The video had been filmed on a whim, by a tired science teacher who barely knew how to focus his phone camera. His plan was to capture a few seconds of Aiden's weird little project to post on the school's Facebook page for parents. Maybe get a like or two from other teachers. Nothing more. But then Aiden pressed a switch. And a glowing, pulsing orb levitated inside a repurposed fish tank, spinning slowly, surrounded by what looked like a magnetic field. And in those 30 seconds, everything changed. No one really knows what makes a video explode online. It's part timing, part luck, part that strange, unspoken language of the internet. But this one had the trifecta. 1. A kid doing something impossibly advanced. 2. Homemade tech with real science behind it. 3. A delivery that was so deadpan, so casual, it felt almost unreal. I'm trying to simulate a stable fusion reaction using magnetically confined plasma. The goal is to extract energy from salt water using resonance fields. That line, uttered with the calm of someone explaining how to boil eggs, hit the internet like a meteor. The video was picked up by a high school science TikTok account. Within hours, it spread like wildfire. By midnight, it was on the front page of Reddit under the headline, "Is this kid for real?" By morning, it hit number 2 trending on YouTube. By lunch, it had been retweeted by Neil deGrasse Tyson. By dinner, Elon Musk had already seen it, twice. People didn't just watch it. They argued over it. No way this is real. This is CGI. My man just casually built a mini sun in his garage. MIT better get this kid a dorm room now. News anchors stumbled over the words, magnetically confined plasma. Podcasters speculated about child prodigies and national security. A conspiracy thread popped up claiming Aiden was an AI in disguise. And through it all, the boy in the video? He was asleep in bed, unaware that the entire world now knew his name. When Aiden woke up, it took 3 tries to unlock his phone. It had frozen from too many notifications. 7,493 missed messages. 1,204 follow requests. And a new email, from Tesla. His hands trembled as he opened it. He read the name Elon Musk 3 times just to be sure it wasn't a prank. Mr. Musk would like to speak with you and your parent or guardian about your recent energy demonstration. Please reply to confirm availability. Aiden stared at the screen. It felt like waking up to find out gravity had reversed overnight. Rachel's reaction was more cautious. They're just people, Aiden. Rich, powerful people. But people. Elon Musk isn't just a person, Aiden said, eyes wide. He's the only adult alive who might understand what I'm trying to do. She nodded, slow and careful. Then we go. But we go together. The rest of the day was a blur. Their phone rang non-stop, journalists, agents, people claiming to be from NASA. A neighbor offered to manage Aiden's brand. A startup founder wanted to license the boy's technology. By the end of the day, Rachel had unplugged the house phone and muted her cell. They needed air. At the grocery store, someone recognized them. That's him. That's the plasma kid. A teenager ran up for a selfie. Another asked for an autograph. The checkout clerk didn't charge them for their eggs. Rachel saw it in her son's face, the discomfort behind the attention. He smiled politely, but his eyes kept scanning for the exit. This is weird, he whispered, tugging at her sleeve. It's only weird because they don't see you, she said. They just see the headline. I don't want to be a headline, he mumbled. I just want to build things. That night, the phone buzzed again. Another email. This one with a calendar invite. You are scheduled to meet Elon Musk at 1:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Thursday. Location, SpaceX HQ. Travel arrangements covered. NDA will be required. Aiden's mouth dropped open. Rachel leaned in, reading over his shoulder. She gave a low whistle. Well, I guess we're going to California. By morning, Aiden was officially a phenomenon. The headlines rolled in. 10-year-old may have built a working fusion device. Elon Musk wants to meet the kid genius blowing up the internet. From garage to genius, who is Aiden Carter? Everyone wanted a piece of the story. Some wanted to celebrate him. Others wanted to own him. And in between, the world buzzed with theories. He's going to be Musk's apprentice. He's the next Tony Stark. He's going to solve the energy crisis. What happens if he disappears? In his room, Aiden turned off the lights and stared at the ceiling. His face glowed from the screen of his laptop, playing back the viral clip. He watched himself say the words again, so calmly, so confidently. But now, they sounded heavier. I'm trying to simulate a stable fusion reaction. He hadn't meant for the world to hear that. He was just explaining. Just thinking out loud. But now, every syllable was under a microscope. And tomorrow, he'd sit across from the one man who might ask the questions no one else thought to ask. The thought made his stomach twist. What if I don't have all the answers? Rachel peeked into the room. Still up? He nodded. Can't sleep. Everyone thinks I'm a genius, Mom. But what if I just got lucky? She walked over, sat on the edge of his bed, and gently brushed his hair back from his forehead. Aiden, genius isn't about having all the answers. It's about asking the questions no one else is brave enough to ask. But Elon, he's gonna expect something from me. Then give him the only thing you have to give, she said. Your truth. Your heart. The rest? That'll come. Aiden took a deep breath. Tomorrow, the world would be watching. And for the first time, he was ready. They arrived in California under gray skies and cameras. As the plane touched down at LAX, Aiden pressed his face to the window, staring out at a landscape he'd only ever seen in movies and documentaries. The buildings were massive. The energy was electric. And the moment he stepped off the jet bridge, people already recognized him. Hey, it's that kid. Yo, Plasma Boy. Can we take a quick picture? Rachel pulled her hoodie over her head and kept Aiden close, her hand never leaving his shoulder. Fame, it turned out, didn't wait for permission. Their car was already there, a sleek black Tesla Model X, sent by SpaceX. The driver, dressed in all black with an earpiece and a clipboard, didn't say much. Just a quiet, "Welcome to California, Mr. Carter," and a nod toward the open door. Aiden slid in slowly, gripping his backpack like it held his whole future. Maybe it did. As the car sped along the freeway, the city blurred around him, sun-baked streets, wide palm trees, and billboards that seemed to scream. Rachel sat beside him, silent but alert. Aiden had never been this far from home before. Never flown. Never had a driver. And yet, he wasn't scared. He was wired. His mind raced. What questions would Elon ask? Would he test him? Would he believe him? Would he? We're here, the driver said. They turned into a complex that looked more like a sci-fi set than a company. Towers of glass. Vast hangars. Test pods. People in SpaceX jackets zipped across the campus on electric bikes. And at the center of it all, a massive, gleaming building that looked like the future had landed and built a headquarters. SpaceX, Hawthorne Campus. Aiden stepped out slowly, feeling like he was standing in a dream. Security was tight. Two men greeted them at the front gate, checked IDs, scanned the Tesla, and ushered them into the glass building. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. Sleek walls. Glowing screens. Rocket parts displayed like art. A scale model of the Falcon 9 hung from the ceiling. Engineers buzzed by in hoodies and badges, many of them throwing curious glances at the 10-year-old kid in jeans and a hoodie. That's him. No way, he's so small. I heard he reverse-engineered nuclear fusion from scrap. Rachel held Aiden's hand a little tighter. You okay? She whispered. He nodded. I think so. But his heart was pounding. Then came the voice. Calm. Precise. Iconic. Aiden. They both turned. There he was, Elon Musk. In person, he was less like the caricature the media painted and more like a man trying very hard not to seem like a genius. Plain t-shirt. Faded jeans. A look in his eyes that was equal parts curiosity and calculation. He held out his hand. It's a pleasure to meet you. Aiden shook it, speechless. For a moment, the world froze. Elon led them down a long corridor, talking casually. We watched the video a dozen times. I even pulled a few engineers off Starship to take a look. He stopped, turned to Aiden. You used salt water? Yes, sir. Electrolyzed to isolate the hydrogen. Then I created a magnetic bottle using 2 homemade field coils. It's not true fusion, but I wanted to simulate plasma behavior under confinement. Elon raised an eyebrow. You simulated confinement, using salvaged electronics? Aiden nodded. And some copper wire from an old toaster. Elon looked at Rachel. Is this for real? I don't know enough to tell you, she replied, but I know he's not making it up. Elon smiled slightly. I believe you. They entered a glass-walled conference room that overlooked the rocket floor. Engineers worked on engines below, sparks flying, machines humming. Aiden couldn't help but stare. Elon poured water into 3 glasses and sat down. So here's the truth, he began. If what you built is even halfway as functional as it seems, then we're looking at someone who just jumped 10 years of R&D, at age 10. I didn't do it to jump anyone, Aiden said. I just wanted to understand it. That caught Elon's attention. He leaned in. That's exactly the mindset I had when I was your age. There was a moment of silence, 2 brilliant minds from different worlds, somehow sharing the same orbit. Then came the questions. Not softballs. Not kid gloves. Real questions. How did you manage the plasma's instability? What equations did you run for confinement thresholds? Did you factor in the cyclotron frequency when testing voltage thresholds? Aiden answered them. Every one. Clearly. Calmly. Occasionally even correcting Elon, not rudely, but with precision. The engineers watching from the other side of the glass couldn't believe it. A few of them took notes. One whispered to another, we're watching history happen right now. Rachel sat quietly, absorbing it all. Her baby, her little boy, talking particle physics with the man who wanted to colonize Mars. She didn't understand the science. But she understood pride. At the end of the meeting, Elon stood. Aiden, I've met Nobel Prize winners who couldn't do what you just did. He paused. I want to offer you something. Not a job. Not a lab. But a mentorship. Access to our R&D, our people, our tools. You keep creating. I'll keep the world out of your way. Aiden's eyes went wide. Seriously? Seriously. He looked at his mom. Her eyes were glassy, her voice quiet. This is your journey, baby. But I'll be with you every step. Aiden turned back to Elon. Then, yes. Let's build something that matters. The handshake that followed wasn't just an agreement. It was the beginning of something the world hadn't seen before. A kid with ideas too big for his age. A billionaire with power too vast for one lifetime. And between them, a spark that might just change everything. The deal was done. The NDA was signed. The headlines were relentless. Aiden Carter and Elon Musk join forces, the future of energy starts now. 10-year-old prodigy gets access to SpaceX's secret R&D lab. Child genius or national asset? But while the media lost its collective mind, Aiden Carter had only one thought running through his head. This has to work. Because if it didn't, if his prototype failed in front of Elon, in front of the SpaceX engineers, in front of everyone, then the world wouldn't just think he was a fake. They'd know. 3 days after the meeting, Aiden stood inside a secure R&D hangar at the SpaceX campus. The place felt like a sci-fi cathedral: glass, steel, and silence. Long white tables. Tool kits that probably cost more than his mom's car. A wall-sized monitor showed a live diagram of Aiden's fusion simulation model. He was flanked by 2 lead engineers, Dr. Leo Chavez, head of Advanced Propulsion Systems, and Mina Cho, a plasma physicist who had written 3 books and worked on ITER in France. Aiden had read all 3 of Mina's books. Twice. "You sure you're ready for this?" Mina asked, glancing at the diagram. Aiden adjusted his safety goggles and replied, voice steady, "I've run this test 67 times at home. This'll be the 68th. It either works, or it teaches me something new." Leo raised an eyebrow. Spoken like a real scientist. The setup was simple, but only in appearance. At the center was a compact unit Aiden called the core, a scaled-down version of his magnetic confinement system, upgraded using real lab-grade materials SpaceX provided. It was no longer cobbled together with kitchen parts and toy motors. Now, it was real. Around it were copper coils, temperature sensors, plasma chamber regulators, and a high-frequency induction generator. The entire rig looked like something out of a science fiction movie, part Iron Man, part DARPA. And it all started with the flick of one switch. Aiden stood in front of the control console, hand hovering over the ignition toggle. Rachel watched from behind the safety glass. She wasn't allowed in the lab during activation, but she could see everything. Her hands were tight around her phone, her fingers twitching like she was ready to record, then delete it if things went wrong. Elon was there, too. He didn't speak. Just watched. Silent. Focused. Aiden glanced at him once. Elon gave the smallest nod. "Go." Aiden took a breath. Held it. Then, click. The switch flipped. The hum started low. A low vibration, like the sound of an approaching storm. Lights flickered across the interface. The chamber began to glow faint blue. Inside the core, hydrogen molecules, separated from salt water using electrolysis, began to ionize. Temperature, rising. Magnetic field, holding. Chamber pressure, stable. Then, plasma ignition. The orb bloomed. A swirling, spinning ball of light floated in the center of the chamber. Controlled. Stabilized. Real. "Holy," Leo whispered, eyes wide. "He actually did it," Mina said, stunned. The monitors lit up with data. Magnetic resonance held steady. No spikes. No leaks. The plasma was confined within the bottle, a sustained reaction that, while miniature, followed every principle of a tokamak-style system. But this wasn't a tokamak. It was better. Compact. Efficient. Portable. And possibly, scalable. "He cracked it," Mina whispered. "Without a billion-dollar facility. Without a team of 40. Just, by himself." "With some toaster parts," Aiden added quietly, not looking up. They laughed, just a little. He didn't. To him, this wasn't a punchline. This was purpose. 10 minutes into the test, they shut it down manually, just to be safe. No overheating. No anomalies. It was a perfect dry run. Elon stepped forward. "Can we see the power output?" Aiden nodded. He had rigged a simple converter to measure theoretical yield. The result wasn't enormous, it wasn't going to power a city, but it was real energy. If scaled properly, Mina said, scrolling through the numbers, this could reduce dependence on fossil fuels by, significantly. It's not about replacing, Aiden added. It's about decentralizing. Giving energy to people who need it most. Villages. Islands. Places that don't have billion-dollar grids. They looked at him. He wasn't just building machines. He was thinking systemically. Back behind the glass, Rachel let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. He did it. Her baby didn't just survive his first test. He nailed it. That night, Elon invited Aiden and Rachel to dinner at a private residence not far from the SpaceX campus. No press. No cameras. Just conversation, food, and fire pits. They talked about everything, from Einstein to Iron Man to energy politics. Aiden asked Elon if he thought Mars could ever develop a fusion grid of its own. Elon smirked. That depends, he said. You thinking of building it? Aiden smiled, then looked up at the stars overhead. Yeah. I am. By the end of the night, Elon pulled Rachel aside. You've raised someone very rare, he said. He doesn't just see the world. He sees what it could be. Rachel nodded. Her voice was quiet. I just hope it doesn't eat him alive. It won't, Elon replied. Not if we protect him. Guide him. And get out of his way when he's ready to fly. Back at the hotel, Aiden collapsed into bed, exhausted but glowing. His eyes stared at the ceiling, imagining what would come next. A working full-scale model. A patent. A world running on clean energy. Maybe even Mars. But for now, all he could think was, I did it. I really did it. And he fell asleep with a smile on his face for the first time in weeks. The news broke faster than Aiden could process. By the time he woke up the next morning, his phone was flooded with notifications. Headlines screamed from every corner of the internet. 10-year-old prodigy develops fusion prototype, Elon Musk takes notice. Aiden Carter, the future of clean energy. Fusion breakthrough by child genius shakes scientific community. Rachel stood at the kitchen counter, scrolling through the endless stream of articles and social media posts. Her face was a mix of pride and concern. Aiden, you need to see this, she called out. Aiden padded into the room, still in his pajamas. He glanced at the screen, his eyes widening as he saw his face plastered across various news outlets. This is insane, he muttered, more to himself than to Rachel. I know, she replied, her voice tinged with worry. But we need to be careful. Not everyone will be as supportive as Elon. The phone rang, cutting through the tension in the room. Rachel answered it on the second ring. Hello. Ms. Carter, a voice on the other end said. This is Senator Thomas Reed from the Senate Energy Committee. We'd like to discuss your son's recent work. Can you come to Washington? Rachel's heart skipped a beat. She exchanged a glance with Aiden, who looked both excited and apprehensive. Of course, Senator, she replied. When would be convenient? We'll have a private jet ready for you tomorrow morning. We'd like to meet with you both in person. The line went dead before Rachel could respond. The next day, they boarded a sleek black jet bound for Washington, D.C. Aiden sat by the window, his mind racing. This was real. This was happening. As the plane descended toward the Capitol, Aiden could see the sprawling city below. The White House. The Capitol. The monuments. It was all so surreal. They were met at the airport by a black SUV with tinted windows. The driver, a tall man in a dark suit, introduced himself as Agent Harris. Welcome to Washington, he said, his tone professional but not unfriendly. I'll be escorting you to the Senate office building. The drive was silent, save for the occasional hum of the engine and the soft click of the turn signal. Aiden stared out the window, taking in the unfamiliar sights. They arrived at the Senate office building, a grand structure that exuded power and history. Inside, Agent Harris led them through a maze of corridors to a large conference room. Seated at the table were Senator Reid and several other individuals Aiden didn't recognize. They all stood as he entered, offering polite smiles and handshakes. Aiden, Ms. Carter, Senator Reid greeted them warmly. "Thank you for coming." Aiden nodded, his palms sweating slightly. He took a seat beside Rachel, who gave his hand a reassuring squeeze. "We've been following your work closely," Senator Reid continued. "What you've accomplished is extraordinary. But we have some concerns." The meeting lasted for hours. They discussed Aiden's fusion prototype in detail, asking questions about its viability, safety, and potential applications. Aiden answered as best as he could, relying on his knowledge and the data he had collected. At one point, Senator Reid leaned forward, his expression serious. "Aiden, we're impressed. But we need to know, are you prepared for the responsibility that comes with this kind of innovation?" Aiden met his gaze, his voice steady. "I'm ready." As they left the meeting, Agent Harris escorted them back to the SUV. "You did well," he said, offering a rare smile. Aiden felt a surge of pride. He had held his own in that room. He had proven that he belonged. Back at the hotel, Rachel sat down beside Aiden on the bed. "How do you feel?" she asked softly. Aiden looked out the window at the city lights twinkling in the distance. "I feel like I'm on the edge of something big," he said. "But I also know it's just the beginning." Rachel smiled, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together." Aiden nodded, leaning into her embrace. The next morning, they received a call from Senator Reid's office. "We'd like to offer you a grant to further develop your prototype," the voice on the other end said. "We believe in your potential, Aiden." Rachel's eyes filled with tears as she listened. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "We won't let you down." As they boarded the plane back to California, Aiden looked out the window once more, his mind filled with possibilities. He had taken the first step toward changing the world. And he wasn't going to stop now. Back in California, the air felt different. Not warmer. Not cooler. Just heavier. Aiden could feel the weight of the world on his 10-year-old shoulders, emails from senators, invitations from universities, and 1,000 news alerts tracking his every move. But none of it mattered as much as the one thing that kept him up at night. Version 2. The second prototype. The one that couldn't fail. They returned to SpaceX like seasoned veterans now. Elon had secured a private lab for Aiden, an entire floor tucked into the west wing of the R&D facility, usually reserved for special projects. No press. No visitors. Just access, freedom, and silence. The new lab was 10 times bigger than Aiden's bedroom and 1,000 times more advanced. Industrial-grade tools. Quantum processors. A zero-gravity simulator in the corner just because Elon thought it would be cool for brainstorming. Rachel stood in the doorway the first time they walked in. "This looks like something out of a Marvel movie," she whispered. Aiden didn't respond. He was already across the room, opening crates, powering up tools, hands twitching with anticipation. This was it. No more fish tanks. No more toasters. Now he had the tools. Now he had a chance to build something the world had never seen. The plan was bold, a fully functioning, small-scale fusion reactor that could run on seawater, fit inside a car trunk, and power a small building, quietly, safely, sustainably. He called it Nova 2. Where his first model had simulated confinement, Nova 2 would generate real, scalable power. He was done with theory. Now came proof. Weeks passed. The media buzzed, but Aiden stayed underground. The world waited, hungry for news. Reporters speculated. Why the silence? Is the genius kid in over his head? Elon's gone quiet, what are they hiding? But inside the lab, something was happening. Something big. The Nova 2 build was a monster of precision. The containment chamber was built with reinforced borosilicate glass and lined with electromagnetic shielding to control radiation bursts. Aiden used neutron reflectors to boost reaction stability and a triple coil magnet design he invented himself to maintain tighter plasma confinement. He worked 12 hours a day. Sometimes more. He forgot to eat. Forgot to check his phone. Rachel brought him sandwiches he didn't finish. She watched from the corner, keeping quiet but keeping close. Aiden didn't speak much during the build phase, he was somewhere else, deep in thought, in numbers, in blueprints. On the 29th day, he stepped back from the reactor and stared at it in silence. Nova 2 stood 6 feet tall, humming softly, bathed in a dull purple glow from its interior plasma field. Mina Cho and Dr. Chavez stood behind him, blinking in disbelief. This is insane, Mina whispered. It looks like something from the future, Chavez added. Aiden nodded once. We're ready. They picked a date, April 12th. The unveiling would be small, just SpaceX engineers, a few officials from the Department of Energy, and Elon himself. No media. Not yet. Aiden didn't want a spectacle. He wanted a result. Rachel sat him down the night before. What if it doesn't work? He looked at her. Calm. Clear-eyed. Then I go back and build Nova 3. She nodded, biting her lip. You know you're not just building machines anymore, right? I know, Aiden said quietly. I'm building a promise. April 12th. The lab was quiet except for the distant hum of servers. Elon stood with arms crossed, flanked by his lead engineers. Government observers whispered among themselves. Aiden stood at the console, his hand hovering over the ignition switch. Everyone ready? A few nods. Rachel held her breath. Mina pressed record on the internal camera. Aiden clicked the toggle. The reactor purred. Then, ignition. Inside Nova 2, plasma bloomed. No explosion. No flash. Just a steady, breathtaking light, glowing white-blue, swirling like a living storm. Data poured into the monitors. Plasma stability, 98%. Power output, 1.8 kilowatts. Radiation, minimal. Heat leakage, negligible. The room was silent. Until Elon whispered. This changes everything. The test ran for 17 minutes. Long enough to prove viability. Long enough to silence doubt. When it ended, Aiden stepped back, his fingers trembling slightly. He turned to the room. This isn't the final version, he said. It's just the beginning. If we scale this right, we can power entire neighborhoods. Hospitals. Emergency shelters. Maybe one day, cities. The room erupted in quiet applause. Rachel wiped her eyes. Mina looked like she'd seen a miracle. Later that night, alone in the lab, Aiden stood in front of Nova 2 with the lights off. The reactor glowed gently in the dark. He whispered to it like it was alive. Let's see how far we can go. The day after the successful Nova 2 test, the phone didn't stop ringing. The emails didn't stop flooding in. And the world didn't stop watching. Elon Musk wasn't known for his subtlety, but when it came to keeping things quiet, he was a master. For the first time, the world would see the potential for Aiden's fusion prototype, but it wasn't going to be a media circus. Not yet. Instead, Elon and his team, along with Aiden and Rachel, were about to face something much larger than they anticipated, the real power behind the curtain. It started with a call from the White House. Good morning, Ms. Carter. This is Emily Roberts from the Office of the President. We'd like to request a private meeting with you and your son in Washington. The president has taken a very keen interest in Aiden's work. Rachel nearly dropped her coffee. The president? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes. We'll have a car pick you up at your convenience. The meeting is scheduled for tomorrow morning. Please keep this confidential for now. The line went dead. Rachel stared at her phone for a moment, her thoughts swirling. Aiden was about to meet the most powerful people in the world, and everything, was about to change. The next morning, they boarded a private jet, and within hours, they touched down in Washington, D.C. Aiden's heart beat faster as the SUV rolled through the streets of the capital. It wasn't just any meeting anymore. This was history in the making. When they arrived at the White House, they were escorted through security by armed agents who barely looked at them. They passed through the West Wing, the hallways filled with the quiet hum of government life. And then, finally, they were ushered into a private room, where several senior aides and a few military officials were already waiting. "Good morning, Miss Carter," Aiden, a woman with short black hair, greeted them as she stood. "I'm Emily Roberts, Chief of Staff. Please, take a seat." Rachel and Aiden sat across from a long, polished table. In a few moments, the door opened, and in walked President Samuel Hayes, a tall man in his early 50s with graying hair and a hard look about him. He wasn't the kind of person who needed to speak loudly to be heard. "Ms. Carter, Aiden," he began, his voice calm but carrying authority. "I've been briefed on your work. The advancements you've made in fusion energy." Aiden could barely believe it. He was sitting across from the President of the United States. But he didn't have time to be starstruck. "Mr. President," Aiden interrupted, looking straight into his eyes, "fusion power is a way to change everything. We can solve the energy crisis. We can stop the environmental destruction caused by fossil fuels." The president nodded, clearly impressed by Aiden's confidence. "Yes, we've been following your work, Aiden. And we believe it's time to take this to the next level. But with such groundbreaking technology, there are serious national security concerns." Aiden's brow furrowed. "National security," he repeated, confused. "How?" Emily leaned forward, her fingers tapping on the table. "There are powerful people, both within the government and outside of it, who would want to control this kind of power. This could change the balance of power on a global scale." It was a moment of realization for Aiden. The world wasn't just watching his every move because of his genius. They were watching because the implications of his invention were massive, dangerous even. The president continued, his tone measured. "If your technology works as promised, it could change how nations operate. It could replace oil, it could free people from the tyranny of energy monopolies. But it could also destabilize economies. We have to control how this gets rolled out." Rachel stiffened beside him, but Aiden remained focused. "What do you mean, control?" Aiden asked. "This isn't about controlling power. It's about giving it to the people." The president leaned back in his chair, clearly considering the boy's words. But then, he spoke with quiet authority. "It's not about control for the sake of control, Aiden. It's about ensuring that the world isn't plunged into chaos. If your fusion reactor works, we need to make sure it's used responsibly. The wrong hands could wreak havoc." Aiden's thoughts churned. Was the world really ready for what he had created? Could the people who had the power to distribute this technology be trusted? And what would happen if it fell into the wrong hands? The president shifted in his chair. "We want you and your mother to remain involved, of course. But we have a national interest in ensuring the technology is protected. We'll need to collaborate with SpaceX and other key organizations to begin the process of scaling the technology and deploying it responsibly." Rachel looked at Aiden, who seemed lost in thought. She squeezed his hand, offering him reassurance. He had already proven he could change the world, but now, the question was, at what cost? When the meeting ended, they were escorted out of the White House in silence. The weight of the conversation hung heavily in the air. The potential for good. The threat of abuse. What happens now? Aiden asked, his voice quiet as they made their way through the halls. Now, we wait, Rachel replied. We wait for them to figure out how they're going to play this. Back at SpaceX, Elon was waiting for them. He could tell something was off. You okay? He asked, his voice genuine. Aiden didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned toward the launch pad where rockets were being prepped for their next missions. SpaceX had always been about pushing boundaries, but this was bigger than space. It was bigger than anything he'd ever imagined. The phone rang, breaking the moment. Rachel answered it quickly. Yes, this is Rachel Carter. She paused, listening. What? Yes. We'll be there. She hung up. Her face had drained of color. It's happening, she whispered. Aiden's heart dropped. He didn't need to ask what she meant. Later that night, Aiden found himself standing in front of the Nova 2 reactor again. The low hum of the machine felt almost comforting. He had created something capable of changing the world. But now the world was going to change him. I don't know what's coming next, he muttered to the reactor. But I'm ready. It was time to take the next step. The days that followed were a blur of meetings, paperwork, and decisions that Aiden and Rachel were hardly prepared for. The president's office had made their intentions clear. They wanted to be directly involved in the development of Aiden's fusion technology. They saw it as a potential national asset, a way to not only secure America's energy future but to reshape the geopolitical landscape entirely. But that wasn't the whole picture. Behind the scenes, the true players were moving in the shadows. And Aiden was about to find out that the road to progress wasn't just paved with good intentions. It started with a call. Rachel was the first to answer, but her expression as she listened quickly turned from neutral to wary. Who is it? Aiden asked, the unease rising in his chest. Rachel placed the phone down, her fingers still holding onto it, as though she didn't want to let go of the conversation she just had. That was, a representative from United Energy, she said slowly. They're one of the largest energy conglomerates in the world. Aiden's heart skipped a beat. The energy industry was massive, and the giants who controlled it had been ruthless in the past. What did they want? He asked, his voice tight. They want a meeting, Rachel replied, her voice trembling slightly. They've heard about the success of Nova 2, and they want to talk about partnerships. Aiden's eyes widened. The idea of working with a corporation that controlled energy for entire nations felt like a potential disaster. Partnership? Aiden repeated, bitterness creeping into his voice. They want to buy me out, don't they? Rachel didn't answer right away. She looked at him with a serious expression. I don't know. But I think we need to go, Aiden. This could be bigger than anything we've imagined. The meeting was scheduled at a private office near downtown Los Angeles. Aiden didn't like the sound of it. It felt too corporate, too controlled. When they arrived, they were greeted by a team of polished executives, all dressed in designer suits, their smiles too perfect to be entirely genuine. One of them, a tall man with slick back hair and a silver watch that gleamed in the light, introduced himself as Franklin Pierce, the senior vice president of United Energy. Aiden, Rachel, he said with a firm handshake, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. I've heard so much about your work. Truly groundbreaking. Aiden didn't return the handshake. Instead, he just nodded. I'm glad you're impressed, Aiden said, his voice flat. But I'm not interested in just impressing people. I want to change the world. Franklin's smile didn't falter. Oh, I believe you will. And that's exactly why we're here. We want to help you do just that. Aiden glanced at Rachel, but she stayed silent, her eyes darting between the executives in the room. Help me? Aiden asked, his voice growing colder. What exactly do you mean by that? Franklin leaned forward, steepling his fingers. What we mean is this, We have the resources, the infrastructure, and the global reach to make Nova 2 a reality. We're talking about powering entire continents with clean energy. Imagine it, no more oil dependence. No more energy shortages. You'd be making history. Aiden couldn't hide the skepticism in his eyes. Sounds too good to be true, he muttered. What's the catch? Franklin's eyes gleamed, like a shark that had found its prey. There's no catch, Aiden, he said, his tone smooth, almost patronizing. All we're asking for is control over the distribution of your technology. We'll handle the scaling, the deployment. You and your mother can stay involved. You'll retain a portion of the intellectual property, but we'll take care of the logistics. Aiden's fists clenched. This was exactly what he'd feared. So, you want to control it, he said, his voice rising with frustration. You want to profit off my work. You don't care about changing the world. You care about monopolizing it. Franklin's smile didn't waver. You're missing the bigger picture. Aiden, think about it. With our backing, you can achieve your dream. You'll be the face of the clean energy revolution. The world will owe its future to you. Aiden felt his stomach turn. He could see it now, the carefully constructed mask of generosity, hiding the cold reality beneath. You don't want to change the world, Aiden said slowly. You just want to own it. Rachel stood up, placing a hand on Aiden's shoulder, her expression firm. I think we've heard enough, she said. We're not interested in your deal. Franklin's smile faltered for a brief moment, but he quickly recovered. I understand, he said smoothly. But know this, Aiden, you don't get to change the world alone. You'll need us. Everyone does. With that, he stood up, offering a handshake. This time, Aiden didn't hesitate. He turned to Rachel, and together, they walked out of the room, the weight of the conversation hanging heavy between them. Back at SpaceX, Elon was waiting for them, his expression unreadable. How did it go? He asked, looking directly at Aiden. They wanted to control everything, Aiden said, his voice filled with disgust. They offered to scale up the technology, but only if they controlled the distribution. It was all about money and power. Elon nodded slowly, understanding the stakes. It's exactly what I warned you about, he said. The moment your invention starts changing the game, the sharks will start circling. They'll do anything to get their hands on it. Aiden's anger was palpable. I won't let them take it. This is mine. Elon placed a hand on Aiden's shoulder. And you're not alone in this. We're going to do this right, without giving up control. Aiden met his gaze, the fire in his eyes burning brighter than ever. We'll build it the way it should be built. And we'll make sure the world knows it's for everyone, not just the rich and powerful. That night, Aiden sat alone in the lab, staring at Nova 2. He had created something that could change everything, but now, the question wasn't just about how to make it work, it was about who could be trusted with it. And the answer wasn't clear. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The days after the meeting with United Energy felt like a blur. Aiden couldn't shake the weight of their offer, or the cold, calculating faces that had surrounded him. It was clear that their interest wasn't in changing the world, it was in owning it. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing that they weren't the only ones who would come for Nova 2. There were other companies, other governments, other forces waiting for the right moment to step in and claim the technology as their own. Aiden wasn't naive. He knew that progress came with a price. But was he willing to pay that price? Or, even worse, would he have to sell out to secure his future? It was late at night when Elon called. Aiden, I need to talk to you, Elon's voice crackled through the phone. There's something I found out. It's bad. Aiden sat up straight, a cold chill creeping up his spine. He could tell that Elon wasn't speaking in his usual tone, he was serious. What's going on? Aiden asked, his voice edged with concern. I've been looking into United Energy, Elon began. They're more than just a corporation. They have ties, big ones, to a lot of governments. I mean, a lot. And it's not just America. Aiden's stomach tightened. What do you mean? I mean, this isn't just a business deal. This is political. They've got their fingers in everything. And the moment they get their hands on Nova, too, they'll control the entire energy market. Every nation, every city, every home will be at their mercy. Aiden's mind raced. He knew the risks of taking the wrong deal, but hearing this made his blood run cold. So, they're not just interested in my invention. They're interested in global power. Exactly, Elon replied. And the worst part is, they've been talking to people in your inner circle. They've been trying to buy influence. If they get their hands on Nova, too, it's not just about the energy crisis. It's about monopolizing it. And they've got the resources to do it. Aiden's grip on the phone tightened. He didn't trust anyone who wielded that much power. Not anymore. What should we do? Aiden asked, his voice low. We can't let them get it. We need to be smarter than they are. We need to move faster, build more secure, and keep it off the table for them. Aiden glanced over at the Nova 2 reactor. It stood there, humming softly in the darkness, a beacon of hope, and a target for anyone who wanted to exploit it. We have to protect it, Aiden said firmly. But we also have to make sure the world can use it. I won't let this be something that's locked away for the rich and powerful. The next few days were filled with frantic activity. Elon and his team worked around the clock to increase the security surrounding Nova 2. Aiden spent hours in the lab, reworking the design, adding layers of encryption and countermeasures. He couldn't afford to trust anyone, not even the government. But as the days wore on, the pressure was mounting. The world was starting to take notice. And with that attention came not just interest, but threats. Aiden's phone buzzed with an incoming text message. It was from Rachel. Aiden, I just got word from a contact at the Pentagon. There's been a move on the other side. Someone else is trying to make a play for Nova 2. Aiden's heart sank. He read the message again, as if expecting it to change. But the reality was clear. The world wasn't going to let him and his family control Nova 2 for long. Who is it? Aiden texted back. The response came in almost immediately. A private investor group backed by some of the world's most powerful financial institutions. They're offering billions for your technology. And they've been in talks with some key military figures. The mention of military figures made Aiden's blood run cold. He knew how dangerous it could be to mix military power with world-changing technology. We can't let them get it, Aiden texted back. We have to move fast. Rachel's next message came through with a single sentence. Meet me at the lab. By the time Aiden arrived, Rachel was already there, pacing in front of Nova 2. Her face was tight with concern, but there was something else, determination. She wasn't going to let this happen. Not on her watch. They're serious this time, Rachel said, her voice shaking with barely contained frustration. We're talking about global powers trying to seize control of your work. We can't sit back anymore, Aiden. Aiden took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. This was more than just a personal fight. This was about the future of energy, the future of freedom. But it was also about survival. What do you suggest we do? Aiden asked. Rachel's eyes flickered toward the console. She knew as well as he did that Nova 2 could change the world, but it could also be weaponized, misused, or hoarded. The stakes were too high. We need to go public, Rachel said. We need to take control of this narrative before they do. We need the world on our side. Aiden looked at her, trying to read the determination in her eyes. The idea of going public was terrifying. It meant exposing everything, the good and the bad. But Rachel was right. The longer they stayed hidden, the easier it would be for others to take control. "All right," Aiden said, his voice steady. "Let's do it. We'll get the press. We'll get the people." The next few hours were a whirlwind. Aiden and Rachel worked with Elon and his team to prepare a live broadcast. They knew they had to act fast, and they knew the moment they went public, they would be putting themselves in the crosshairs. At 8 p.m. sharp, Aiden stood in front of the camera, his hands steady, his face calm. The world was about to learn the truth. "Good evening," Aiden began, his voice clear and confident. "My name is Aiden Carter, and I've created something that will change the world. A clean, limitless source of energy, a fusion reactor called Nova 2. This technology can power cities, countries, and homes for generations to come. And today, I'm here to tell you that it's real." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in. "This is not a pipe dream. It's not a theory. This is a solution to the energy crisis that has plagued our planet for decades. But I won't let anyone take control of it for their own gain. This is for the people, not the powerful." As the broadcast ended, Aiden sat back, feeling a sense of finality. There was no turning back now. The moment the broadcast ended, Aiden felt like the weight of the world was pressing down on his shoulders. The truth was out. The whole world now knew about Nova 2. And with that knowledge came not only hope but danger. He sat there, staring at the empty screen, the hum of Nova 2 in the background. The lab felt colder than usual, the silence amplified by the magnitude of the moment. "Do you think they're watching?" Rachel asked, standing beside him, her voice barely above a whisper. Aiden didn't answer immediately. Instead, he let out a long breath and leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "They're already watching," he muttered. "And they won't stop until they have it." Over the next few hours, the notifications started flooding in, emails, messages, calls. The media was abuzz, and governments around the world were issuing statements. It was the kind of attention Aiden had always dreamed of, but it wasn't the kind he wanted. He picked up his phone and checked the dozens of messages that had flooded in. Most of them were from journalists, asking for interviews. Some were from activists, praising his work. But a few, just a few, were from names that made his blood run cold. One stood out. It was from Franklin Pierce, the man from United Energy. "Aiden, I think we've misunderstood each other. You're a visionary, but you're playing a dangerous game. I hope you'll reconsider our offer. This is bigger than you or me. Let's talk." Aiden tossed the phone onto the desk. The offer still loomed over him, like a shadow that refused to fade. He had rejected them once, but something told him that wasn't the end of it. "What do you think they'll do next?" Rachel asked, clearly reading the tension on his face. Aiden didn't have an answer. He had hoped that by going public, he'd take control of the situation. But in reality, he had just thrown a match into a powder keg. As the night wore on, Aiden and Rachel were in the lab, working on the next stage of the project. The technology was sound, but now the question wasn't just about science, it was about security. They needed to secure Nova 2 from the people who would stop at nothing to control it. "I've added the latest encryption protocols," Rachel said, typing rapidly on the computer. "We can protect the data from most outside attacks, but I don't know how long it'll hold up. If they really want it, they'll find a way." Aiden nodded, his mind racing. If it was a matter of time before United Energy, or someone else, made their move, then they had to be prepared. They needed to think 3 steps ahead. "We have to get ahead of them," Aiden said, his voice determined. "We can't just wait for them to come to us. We need to take this public, but in a way that they can't ignore." Rachel paused, considering the weight of his words. "What are you thinking?" Aiden's gaze sharpened. "I'm thinking we need a bold move, something that no one can ignore. We go straight to the UN. We present Nova 2 as a solution to the global energy crisis. We make it clear that this isn't just a US problem, it's a world problem. And we don't let anyone take it away. Rachel didn't respond immediately. She could see the fire in Aiden's eyes, the drive to do something radical. But it wasn't without its risks. And what if they try to shut us down, she asked. What if we get caught in the middle of an international power struggle? Aiden looked at Nova 2, the machine that could change everything. If we don't do it, they'll take it anyway, he said quietly. And they'll control it for the rich, for the few. I'm not letting that happen. The next day, they arranged a meeting with representatives from several countries, including key players from the European Union and China. It wasn't a direct UN meeting, but it was close enough. Aiden, Rachel, and Elon gathered in the small conference room, preparing to make their case. The room was tense as Aiden stood in front of the projector, his presentation slides up on the screen. Behind him, Rachel and Elon were ready to back him up if things went sideways. Ladies and gentlemen, Aiden began, his voice steady and confident, I'm here today to show you a future that's not just possible, it's already here. Nova 2 is a clean, sustainable energy source that can power cities, industries, and homes across the world. He paused, letting the gravity of the moment settle in. But I'm not here to sell you a product. I'm here to offer you a solution to a global crisis. Our world is at a tipping point when it comes to energy. Fossil fuels are running out. Climate change is accelerating. And yet, we're still clinging to outdated systems. Aiden turned toward the map on the screen, showing the growing energy demand, the rise in global temperatures, and the strain on existing resources. The room was quiet as he made his case. Nova 2 represents the next step in energy. It's more than just power, it's a chance to change everything. But I'm not going to let it fall into the hands of corporations or governments who will use it for their own gain. I want to make this available to every country, every person, not just those with the most money or the most influence. There was a long silence in the room. The representatives exchanged glances, clearly processing the magnitude of what Aiden was offering. Finally, a voice broke the silence. This is bold, Aiden, said Catherine Lee, a representative from the European Union. You're asking us to bypass the normal channels, to give up control over a technology that could reshape global politics. Aiden's heart raced, but he kept his voice calm. Yes, I am. But I'm not asking you to give up control. I'm asking you to give the world a chance to have access to clean, sustainable energy. No one can own this. It's a gift to humanity, and it belongs to everyone. There was another pause, this one longer than the first. And what happens if the world doesn't accept this? Catherine asked. What happens if the powers that be, corporations, governments, decide to fight back? Aiden's eyes hardened. Then we fight back too, he said quietly. We protect it. We make sure the world knows what's at stake. As the meeting concluded, Aiden felt a strange mix of hope and dread. He had laid everything on the line. But now, the real challenge was just beginning. That night, as Aiden walked out of the building with Rachel, he glanced at his phone. Another message from Franklin Pierce. I warned you, Aiden. You don't know what you're up against. Aiden's jaw clenched. He wasn't going to back down. Not now. The days following the UN meeting were tense, each hour dragging like the last. News outlets, from major TV networks to independent journalists, were buzzing about Nova 2. They were all talking about its potential to change the world, to shift the power dynamics of the global energy market forever. But with every new headline, the pressure only grew. Aiden's phone never stopped ringing. He had become a global figure virtually overnight, but the spotlight brought more than just praise, it brought enemies, too. Behind every supportive message, every congratulatory tweet, he could feel the shadow of those who wanted control. The first sign that things were taking a dark turn came in the form of an unexpected visit. Aiden was in the lab late one night, reviewing the final calculations for Nova 2's next phase when he heard the knock at the door. He wasn't expecting anyone. "Come in," Aiden called, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. The door creaked open, and Rachel walked in, her face drawn, her eyes tired. "We need to talk," she said, her tone more serious than he'd ever heard it. Aiden pushed himself out of his chair. "What's going on?" Rachel closed the door behind her, her voice lowering as if she was afraid someone might overhear. "I got a call from one of my contacts at the Pentagon," she began. "They're concerned about the way things are escalating. There's been talk of covert operations to secure Nova, 2. And not just from corporations. Governments are making moves behind the scenes." Aiden's stomach churned. He had known it was coming. The reality of what he was offering wasn't as simple as a free market revolution. It was an invitation to global chaos. "Are they coming for us?" Aiden asked, the fear finally creeping into his voice. Rachel nodded grimly. "They're already here, Aiden. We need to move Nova 2 off the radar, out of the public eye, and fast. If they can't get to you directly, they'll go after your people. They'll use everything they can, intimidation, threats, even sabotage." Aiden swallowed hard. He hadn't considered how much would be at stake for everyone around him, everyone who had helped him get this far. "What do we do now?" he asked quietly, the weight of responsibility heavier than ever before. Rachel's eyes met his, full of resolve. "We have to make Nova 2 a public utility," she said firmly. "We give it to the world. But we do it on our terms. That way, no one can take it from us." The decision was made. They would go even further than before. Aiden would release Nova 2's blueprints to the public, along with the necessary resources to build it, all under an open-source license. The world could use the technology, but no single entity could control it. At least, that was the plan. As the announcement was prepared, the first major shift came. An unknown assailant, believed to be connected to a private security firm hired by one of the interested parties, attempted to breach Nova 2's lab. It wasn't a full-scale attack, it was a warning. Aiden had never been a stranger to risks, but seeing the destruction up close made the stakes feel all too real. The lab had been sabotaged, computers wiped clean, security footage erased. They hadn't taken anything of real value, but the message was clear: they were willing to go to extremes to prevent Nova 2 from seeing the light of day. It was a wake-up call. The danger was no longer theoretical. They were being hunted. Rachel stayed by Aiden's side, working tirelessly to restore everything that had been lost, while also setting up a new set of security measures. In the meantime, the world was beginning to react. Some saw Aiden as a hero, a visionary on the cusp of bringing about a new era of energy and sustainability. Others saw him as a threat, someone who was tampering with forces that could destabilize global power structures. And then, there were those who saw an opportunity to profit. Aiden knew that there would always be people trying to hijack his vision for their own gain. But there was a greater threat, the bigger picture. Governments were beginning to circle, and not all of them were friendly. One morning, just as Aiden was about to sit down to review a meeting schedule, his phone rang. It was an unknown number. Aiden Carter, the voice on the other end said, a cold, calculating tone in its words. "This is Franklin Pierce. We're done playing games." Aiden froze. "Pierce. The man from United Energy. I think you know why I'm calling," Pierce continued. "You've made a huge mistake. You've thrown a wrench into everything we've worked for. We had a deal. You could have kept control. Now you've just made a target of yourself. And I don't think you'll like the consequences." Aiden's grip on the phone tightened. He had known that this was coming, but hearing it from Pierce's own mouth made it all too real. "I'll never give it to you, Pierce," Aiden said, his voice steady despite the fear that crawled up his spine. There was a moment of silence on the other end. "I don't think you understand, Aiden," Pierce's voice darkened. You've set a dangerous precedent. The world isn't ready for this kind of power to be in the hands of a single person. And if you continue down this path, you'll regret it. The call ended abruptly. Aiden let the phone drop onto the table, a sinking feeling in his chest. He had no illusions about what was coming next. The threats weren't just words, they were a promise. It's happening, isn't it? Rachel asked, her voice soft but filled with knowing dread. Aiden nodded slowly, the weight of everything he had worked for crashing down on him. It's happening, he said quietly. They won't stop until they control it. And if they can't control it, they'll destroy it. The plan had changed once again. It wasn't just about securing Nova 2. It was about survival. Aiden and Rachel knew they had to make a choice. The price of freedom was steep. And no matter how hard they fought, they were no longer just up against corporations or governments. They were up against the very forces that controlled the world. The people who would stop at nothing to maintain their grip on power. But Aiden wasn't ready to give up. We'll fight, Aiden said, determination growing in his voice. We'll fight with everything we've got. And we won't let them win. As the days passed, the world grew darker. Aiden could feel the storm gathering around him, and it was only a matter of time before the lightning struck. The darkness was closing in. Aiden could feel it, creeping around the edges of his mind, pressing in from all sides. The threats from United Energy were becoming more real by the day, and the world he had built, his vision for Nova 2, was in jeopardy. Every step he took, every move he made, felt like he was walking on the edge of a precipice, with nothing but the unknown waiting below. The first blow came in the form of a cyber attack. Rachel had warned him it was coming, but when it hit, it still felt like a punch to the gut. All of Nova 2's files were wiped. Everything, the blueprints, the code, the calculations, was gone. Every bit of progress they had made, every breakthrough, lost in an instant. Aiden stared at the empty screen, unable to process what had just happened. For a moment, time stood still. The room felt suffocating, the air thick with tension. He had been prepared for threats, but this was different. How did they get in? Aiden asked, his voice shaky. Rachel, who had been on the phone with their security team, looked up at him, her face pale. They used a backdoor we didn't know about. It was hidden in the latest update to the encryption software. We missed it. And now it's too late. Aiden clenched his fists. This wasn't just a cyber attack, it was a message. A warning. And the people behind it weren't playing games anymore. He had no choice but to move fast. They couldn't risk sitting idly by and waiting for the next move. If they didn't act now, Nova 2 would be lost forever. In the span of hours, they worked in overdrive, trying to restore what they could, but Aiden knew it wasn't enough. They needed to think bigger. They needed to go underground, keep everything off the radar for as long as possible, and secure a backup plan, one that could keep the technology safe from prying eyes. That night, Aiden called an emergency meeting with Elon Musk. The stakes had never been higher. As one of the few people Aiden trusted implicitly, he needed Elon's help more than ever. They needed to move quickly and decisively, and Elon was the only person who could help them navigate this new battlefield. They met in a small conference room at SpaceX's headquarters, the sterile walls reflecting the gravity of the situation. Aiden was used to the high-tech environment, but today, the buzz of innovation felt like a distant memory. What's the status? Elon asked, sitting across from Aiden and Rachel. His face was uncharacteristically serious, the usual spark of humor gone. Aiden filled him in on the attack. When he finished, there was a long silence. They're trying to crush us, aren't they? Elon said, his voice low. I knew it was only a matter of time. Aiden nodded. We've got to keep moving. We need to secure Nova 2 in a way that no one can touch it. We can't let them get their hands on it. Elon leaned back in his chair, thinking. All right. We're going to do this the hard way. We need to get Nova 2 off the grid. I'll have some of my engineers put together a fully secure, mobile lab. You can hide in plain sight. The best way to protect something like this is to make it invisible. Aiden's heart skipped a beat. Elon was right. It was the only way. Do you think we can get everything back? Rachel asked, her voice tight with concern. The files, the data? Elon nodded. We'll do everything we can. But we need to move fast. Every second we waste, the enemy gets closer. I'll make sure we're ready by tomorrow. As they prepared to move, Aiden couldn't shake the feeling that they were being hunted. Every time he looked over his shoulder, he imagined someone, or something, lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike. He spent the rest of the night going over every piece of Nova 2's blueprint he could remember, trying to commit as much of it to memory as possible. The risk of losing it all was too great. We have to be careful, Rachel warned. We can't trust anyone. Not even the people we thought we could. Aiden agreed. The line between friend and foe was becoming increasingly blurred. As much as he wanted to trust Elon, even he couldn't know who else might be working behind the scenes to bring them down. The next morning, they packed up what they could in a hurry. It felt surreal. Aiden had imagined being in this moment before, but never like this. Never under these circumstances. They weren't just moving a project anymore, they were moving a dream. A dream that might very well get them killed. Elon's team had already prepared the mobile lab, an unmarked van equipped with state-of-the-art tech and security features. It wasn't glamorous, but it was secure. It would have to be enough. Aiden, Rachel, and Elon piled into the van, and they hit the road, leaving the city behind. The weight of the decision felt heavy, but Aiden couldn't afford to second-guess himself now. Every move counted. They set up camp in a remote location just outside of the city, in a nondescript industrial park where no one would think to look. In the silence of the night, Aiden couldn't help but reflect on everything that had led them here, the dreams of changing the world, the long nights spent in the lab, the promises they had made to themselves. It all felt so far away now, as if those moments were part of a different life. We're on the edge now, Aiden, Rachel said quietly, breaking his train of thought. One wrong move, and it's all over. Aiden looked at her, his face grim. We won't let that happen, he said. We're not giving up. Not now. Not ever. That night, Aiden couldn't sleep. He lay wide awake, staring at the ceiling of the mobile lab. Outside, the world seemed so far away, like it no longer mattered. Inside, it was just him and the people who had stood by him. But as much as they had each other, Aiden knew that wasn't going to be enough. The storm was coming. And this time, there would be no escape. The days blurred together as they settled into their new, temporary existence. The mobile lab, tucked away in an industrial park far from the prying eyes of the city, had become their sanctuary, and their prison. Aiden couldn't remember the last time he'd seen the sun. Each day was consumed by a mix of technical work, endless security checks, and, most of all, the ever-present tension in the air. Aiden's thoughts were constantly drifting to the question that haunted him, is this worth it? He had started this project with a vision of creating something that would change the world, a world where energy was free, sustainable, and accessible to everyone. But the deeper they went into hiding, the more he realized how much it was costing. The world wasn't ready for this kind of change. And he wasn't sure he was ready for it either. Rachel and Elon were busy in their respective corners of the mobile lab, working furiously to stabilize the remaining data and keep the technology intact. Aiden was at the main console, scrolling through Nova 2's blueprints, trying to find some way forward, some path that would lead them to safety. But there were no easy answers. Aiden, we need to talk, Rachel said, her voice cutting through the quiet hum of the lab. Aiden looked up. Her face was pale, but her expression was determined. What is it? He asked, standing up to meet her. She stepped closer, her eyes narrowing with concern. It's getting worse. They're closing in on us. I've been tracking their movements, and they've brought in specialized teams, contractors, mercenaries. The kind of people who don't just break into labs, they take lives to get what they want. Aiden's stomach dropped. This was no longer just a matter of stolen data or corporate espionage. This was personal. And it was getting dangerous, more dangerous than he could have ever anticipated. "How much time do we have?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Rachel hesitated, her eyes flicking to the door. "Not much. Maybe a couple of days. Maybe less." Aiden nodded grimly. "Then we need to act now." They had prepared for this. Or at least, they thought they had. But no amount of planning could have prepared them for the reality of what was coming. Elon, overhearing their conversation, approached them with a grim look on his face. "There's another problem," he said, running a hand through his hair. "We've just lost one of our key contacts. They were handling the encryption and data security for the system. They've gone silent." Aiden's eyes narrowed. "Silent? Gone dark? No communication? No response to my attempts to reach them? I'm afraid they've been compromised." Rachel stepped in, her face tight with frustration. "This is what they do, Aiden. They're playing the long game. They've been planning this for months. They know every move we make. They're trying to wear us down, exhaust us, make us give up." Aiden clenched his fists, the anger and frustration building inside him. "Well, they've got the wrong guy," he said, his voice firm. "We're not giving up. Not now. Not ever." As the hours passed, Aiden couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. It wasn't just paranoia. It was a cold, creeping certainty that grew stronger with every passing moment. Someone out there knew where they were. Someone was coming for them. They fortified the mobile lab as best they could. Elon made a few calls, arranging for backup from trusted friends in the industry. But Aiden knew it wasn't enough. They couldn't rely on other people anymore. The time had come to make a stand, no more running, no more hiding. By the time nightfall came, the air inside the mobile lab felt thick with tension. Every light seemed too bright, every sound too loud. Aiden paced back and forth, feeling trapped, cornered. "What now?" Rachel asked, breaking the silence. She was standing in front of the console, typing furiously. Aiden didn't have an immediate answer. But then, a thought struck him like a bolt of lightning. He stopped pacing and turned to Rachel. "What if we turn their own system against them?" Rachel raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "They've been using our own technology against us, tracking us, attacking our security systems. But what if we use Nova 2's full potential? What if we create a decentralized network, a global defense system that can spread the technology out of their reach? We make it impossible for them to track, impossible for them to control." Rachel's eyes widened as the idea began to sink in. "You're suggesting we give the world access to Nova 2, but in a way that even we can't control it?" Aiden nodded. "Exactly. We take it off the grid, but not just for us. For everyone. The moment we put it out there, it's out of their hands. If they want to stop it, they'll have to fight the entire world." Elon, who had been listening in, smiled for the first time in days. "I like it. It's bold. It's risky. But it might just work." They didn't waste any more time. With Elon's help, they set to work immediately. They began developing the necessary algorithms to create a decentralized version of Nova 2, one that would distribute its core power across multiple networks. If the technology could be spread far enough, it would be virtually impossible for anyone to control it. The process was grueling. Aiden had to push his mind to the limit. His exhaustion was palpable, but he refused to stop. He knew this was their last shot. If they didn't act now, they would lose everything. Hours later, as the first rays of dawn began to creep through the small windows of the mobile lab, they were ready. They had done it. Nova 2's code had been rewritten, distributed, and hidden in multiple layers of encryption. "It's done," Rachel said, her voice a mix of relief and caution. "Now we just need to release it." Aiden took a deep breath. He could feel the weight of the decision bearing down on him. This was it. They were crossing the line. There would be no turning back. "Let's do it," he said quietly. They pressed the button. The world would never be the same. But even as the system went live, Aiden felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. The calm before the storm. He knew what would come next. They had just made an enemy of the most powerful forces in the world. And they weren't going to go down without a fight. As the servers hummed to life, Aiden looked at Rachel and Elon. "We've just ignited a revolution," he said, his voice low. "And now we wait." The stillness that followed the launch of Nova 2's decentralized network felt almost surreal. Aiden sat back in his chair, his eyes fixed on the monitor. The code, now live, had spread across the globe, trickling into millions of devices, infiltrating servers, and slowly becoming a part of the very fabric of the internet. It was working. But the victory was hollow. Even as the system went live, Aiden knew it was only a matter of time before the storm hit. The people they had just crossed were not ordinary adversaries. United Energy had vast resources, ruthless tactics, and an unwavering drive to preserve their monopoly on the world's energy. By the time Aiden and his team had managed to secure the code, it was too late. The ripples of their actions had already begun to spread. News outlets picked up on the story, and the public response was immediate. Is this the future of energy? Or the end of it? How one tech startup just changed the global energy landscape. The world's eyes were on Nova 2. But they weren't the only ones watching. The first signs of retaliation came swiftly. Aiden's phone buzzed incessantly, the screen flashing with messages from Rachel. He didn't need to read them all to know what had happened. His stomach twisted as he dialed her number. "Aiden," Rachel's voice came through, strained and tense. "We've got a problem." "What's happening?" "The network's being attacked. They're using every tool they have, hacking, physical sabotage, media manipulation. It's like they're throwing everything they've got at us." Aiden's pulse quickened. They had known it was coming, but to feel it happen in real time was another thing entirely. "Where's Elon? Can we pull the system offline?" Rachel hesitated. He's trying to isolate the core servers. But it's getting complicated. We're facing a multi-front assault. Our own network is being used against us." Aiden's heart sank. The whole reason they decentralized Nova 2 was to protect it from exactly this. But they were up against something far bigger than any one system could defend. "We need to take it offline. Now. Before they destroy it." "I'm on it," Rachel said, but Aiden could hear the uncertainty in her voice. It might be too late. It didn't take long before the worst-case scenario unfolded. United Energy had activated a counterattack, unleashing a swarm of rogue AI programs designed to infiltrate Nova 2's infrastructure and corrupt the decentralized nodes. The system was buckling under the weight of the attack. Aiden watched helplessly as lines of code disappeared from the screen. The data, the technology, the future they had worked so hard to create, it was all at risk. "We need to get out of here," Elon's voice cut through the noise, his face grim as he walked into the room, eyes glued to his own screen. "If they're going to come for us, we need to be ready." Rachel nodded. Aiden could see the fear in her eyes. But it wasn't fear of losing the data. It was the fear of what came next. "We can't just run," Aiden said, standing up. "We've already set things in motion. We're not going to let them shut us down." Elon looked at him, his brow furrowed. "I get it. But we have to be smart about this. They know who we are now. And they're coming for us. Aiden turned back to the screen. He was on the edge, one wrong move and it would all come crashing down. But he had no intention of letting that happen. He wasn't going to back down. Not after everything they had sacrificed. "We fight back," Aiden said, his voice firm. "This is bigger than us now. If we lose, everything we've worked for is gone. But if we can hold them off, we can change the world." And so, the battle began. The next few hours were a blur of frantic action. Elon's team worked around the clock to fortify their defenses, launching countermeasures to protect Nova 2's core system. Rachel and Aiden, meanwhile, dove deep into the code, scrambling to isolate the most vulnerable nodes and patch the security holes. It was a race against time, but with every second that passed, Aiden could feel the walls closing in on them. The attacks came in waves, each one more intense than the last. But Nova 2, now fully decentralized, began to show its resilience. The network spread across the globe, making it harder for United Energy to target and destroy. Even as one node was compromised, dozens more would take its place. But that didn't mean they were out of danger yet. By the time the sun rose, Aiden's mind was exhausted, his body a shell of its former self. But it was also clear that they had won their first battle. Nova 2 was still alive, still growing. They'd made it through the night. And as the team gathered around the main console to assess the damage, a sense of cautious relief washed over them. "We're not out of the woods yet," Rachel said, her voice low. "But we've got a foothold. We've got a chance." Aiden nodded, his gaze fixed on the screen. They had won for now, but the war had just begun. United Energy wouldn't stop. And neither would he. "This is just the beginning," Aiden said, more to himself than to anyone else. "We've started something bigger than any of us. And we're not going to stop until it's done." As the team gathered their strength and prepared for the next phase of their fight, Aiden looked out the window of the mobile lab. The world was waking up, unaware of the battle that had just begun in the shadows. But Aiden knew one thing for sure: the revolution had started. And there was no turning back. The world was waking up to a new reality, one that they didn't entirely understand. As the sun rose over cities across the globe, people were still processing the fact that the energy crisis had shifted in a matter of hours. Nova 2, the decentralized energy system, was now live, and no one was quite sure who controlled it or what its implications were. Across social media, a wave of uncertainty spread like wildfire. Was this the end of the energy monopoly? Or was it the beginning of something more dangerous? Conspiracy theories, heated debates, and fervent discussions swirled in every corner of the internet. Some hailed Nova 2 as the dawn of a new age, while others feared it was a Pandora's box that, once opened, could never be closed. Aiden and his team had spent the last few hours fortifying their defenses, but there was little rest. The immediate response from the world's governments was swift and unexpected. At first, it was the usual corporate spin, condemnation, warnings about the illegality of Nova 2's launch, and the usual threats. But as the hours passed, things started to escalate. The powers that be were realizing they were dealing with something far more complex, and far more dangerous, than they had anticipated. By mid-morning, Aiden received an encrypted message from an anonymous source. His heart skipped a beat as he saw the name at the top of the message. The Coalition of Global Leaders. It was a group of the world's most powerful governments, an organization with influence over both the energy sector and military affairs. They had been keeping a close eye on Nova 2 from the moment it went live. Aiden had expected their response to be hostile, but he hadn't expected it to be this coordinated. To Aiden Ward. From the Coalition of Global Leaders. Subject: Immediate action required. We are aware of your actions with Nova 2. This message serves as both a warning and a request for immediate cooperation. Your technology has caused massive instability in the global energy infrastructure. We demand that you cease all operations related to Nova 2 and provide the coalition with full access to the system. Aiden stared at the message, feeling a mixture of disbelief and anger. The nerve. They were offering him no choice but to comply, demanding access to something that had the potential to change the entire world. He tapped his fingers against the desk, considering his options. There was no way he was giving in. They had come this far, and this was bigger than any of them. It was about freedom, progress, and taking control away from those who had hoarded it for too long. The message was clear: either he handed over control, or the full weight of the world's power would come crashing down on him. "What are you going to do?" Rachel's voice interrupted his thoughts. She had come to stand next to him, her expression hardening as she read the message over his shoulder. "We don't comply," Aiden replied firmly. "We fight back. We can't let them take this from us." Rachel nodded, but there was a shadow of doubt in her eyes. The risk was enormous. Aiden could see that she was struggling with the weight of their decisions. This wasn't just about protecting Nova 2 anymore. It was about survival. That afternoon, as tensions mounted, the response from the public only grew more intense. Protests broke out in major cities across the globe. People were confused, frightened, and angry. They wanted answers. They wanted clarity. But the one thing they didn't want was to lose the possibility of a new, clean, and sustainable energy system. Meanwhile, Aiden's team was working overtime to strengthen Nova 2's defense systems. Elon was on the phone with several trusted contacts, organizing the resistance that had already begun to form in secret. They weren't alone. They had been preparing for this moment for years, waiting for someone to take the first step toward freeing the world from the stranglehold of the energy monopolies. Now, that someone was Aiden. Elon's voice was grim as he entered the room where Aiden and Rachel were working. "The coalition is using more than just threats now. They've activated legal actions, sent operatives to seize control of energy facilities, and begun pushing their narrative through global media. They want Nova 2 out of the picture, and they won't stop until it is." Aiden exhaled sharply, his fingers tightening around the edges of the desk. "So, what do we do now?" Rachel asked, her tone tense. "We can't just sit here and wait for them to make their move." Aiden stood up, his mind racing with possibilities. He couldn't allow Nova 2 to be taken down, not when it was so close to changing everything. This wasn't just about energy, it was about access, equality, and a future where technology worked for the people, not for profit. "We take the fight to them," Aiden said, determination settling in his voice. "We fight back in every way we can. But we can't do it alone. We need to unite the people, show them what's at stake. We need to expose the truth about the energy monopolies and make them realize the power is in their hands now." Rachel exchanged a look with Elon. They both knew the risks, but Aiden was right. This was no longer just a technical challenge, it was a battle for the future. And they were going to have to fight it on every front. That evening, Aiden released a public statement, a rallying cry that would echo across the globe. He knew it would make him a target, but it was the only way forward. "People of the world, the time for change is now. We have given you a tool, one that has the potential to free every person, every community, from the shackles of a broken system. But the powers that be will stop at nothing to take it from you. They want to control your future, your energy, and your lives. We will not let them. The fight for our freedom has just begun. Stand with us, or stand aside." As the message went live, the response was overwhelming. Thousands of people took to the streets in solidarity. Protests spread like wildfire. Social media exploded with support, hashtags like #Nova2Revolution trending worldwide. Aiden felt a surge of hope, people were listening. They were ready for change. But Aiden knew the road ahead would be long and dangerous. The coalition would not back down easily. They would fight, and they would fight dirty. But Aiden wasn't going to stop. The revolution had begun, and there was no turning back. The air was thick with tension, as if the entire world was holding its breath. Aiden sat in a small command center, staring at the multitude of screens in front of him, watching the fallout from his latest message spread across the globe. Every tweet, every protest, every comment was a small victory. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. The coalition was escalating its response, pulling strings behind the scenes, throwing every legal, financial, and political weapon they had at him. Their goal was simple: shut down Nova 2 before it gained enough traction to be unstoppable. But Aiden couldn't afford to wait for the perfect moment to act. He had to seize control of the narrative. The world needed to see that they weren't just fighting for a better energy system, they were fighting for freedom, equality, and a future where technology served the people, not the corporations. Rachel walked into the room, her face grim, her eyes tired but determined. "They're ramping up. We've got reports from our underground contacts. There are covert operations happening at energy facilities in several countries. They're shutting things down. Dismantling the movement." Aiden's jaw clenched. They knew they were playing a dangerous game, but this was more than he'd expected. "What are they doing now?" Aiden asked, trying to steady his nerves. "They're deploying military forces to protect energy infrastructure," Rachel said. "They've got their hands on a lot of the public narrative. The media's already been bought off in key regions. But there's something else. A lot of the protesters, the ones that were with us, well, they've started to back down." Aiden felt a pang of frustration. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. The people were supposed to rise up and stand beside them, not turn away in fear. "We can't let them silence us," Aiden said, his voice unwavering. "We need to do more than just resist. We need to strike at the heart of their power. It's not just about energy anymore. It's about their control over everything. We need to take away their leverage." Aiden knew it was time to take the fight to the next level. Up until now, they had been playing defense, protecting Nova 2 from the onslaught of attacks. But they needed more than just survival, they needed to go on the offensive. Elon, who had been working tirelessly in the background, was the first to speak up. "If we're going to hit them hard, we need to take out their main communication channels. We need to disrupt the flow of information. If we do that, we can cripple their ability to mobilize." It was a risky plan, but it was the only option. Aiden didn't hesitate. "Do it. Take out their global network. We need to hit them where it hurts." The hours that followed were a blur of activity. Elon's team worked quickly, launching a series of coordinated cyber attacks on United Energy's central communication hubs. It wasn't just about disrupting their ability to transmit data, it was about sending a message. Aiden knew that the more they could destabilize the coalition's ability to control the narrative, the more they could embolden the people to stand up and take action. "It's done," Elon said, his voice filled with both exhaustion and a touch of triumph. "Their communication systems are down. For now, at least." But as the digital silence set in, the impact of their actions began to ripple outward in unexpected ways. The immediate effect was dramatic. News outlets scrambled to adjust, governments began to issue public statements, and some regions plunged into chaos. But the most surprising thing wasn't the panic it caused among the elites, it was the way the public reacted. "We did it," Rachel said, staring at the data streaming across her screen. "People are waking up. They're starting to realize that we're not the enemy." Aiden nodded, but he knew better than to celebrate too early. The real test was still ahead. Nova 2 wasn't just an energy system, it was a challenge to a global order that had existed for decades. And the coalition was not going to go down without a fight. It wasn't long before the retaliation came. It started small at first: rumors, online smear campaigns, and misleading reports about Nova 2's security vulnerabilities. Then it escalated. There were reports of widespread arrests, particularly in countries with large protest movements. In some places, military forces were deployed to suppress dissent with overwhelming force. But even as they cracked down on protests, they couldn't stop the tide from turning. Aiden felt the weight of every decision pressing down on him. He had made a choice, and it was one that could change the world, but there were consequences. The revolution was no longer just about technology. It was about survival, about protecting the future they had all fought so hard for. "They're coming for us," Elon said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "They won't stop until they've crushed us completely." Aiden took a deep breath. This was it, the tipping point. The line between revolution and destruction was razor-thin. Every action they took now would decide the course of history. If they didn't stay ahead of the curve, if they didn't keep pushing forward, everything they had worked for could unravel in an instant. "Then we don't stop," Aiden said, standing tall. "We push harder. We expose them. We make sure the world knows who the real enemies are." Rachel stepped forward, her expression one of resolve. "They've underestimated us. This isn't just about energy anymore. This is about freedom. This is about our future." Aiden looked at the team around him, the people who had put everything on the line to make this moment possible. They were ready. He was ready. "Let's finish this," Aiden said. "We're not backing down." That night, as the stars blinked into view outside the windows of their mobile lab, Aiden couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the precipice of something monumental. The struggle for a better world was no longer a distant dream, it was happening now. And it was up to them to see it through. The days following the successful disruption of the coalition's communication network were a whirlwind. The media landscape was in turmoil. Governments scrambled to manage their narratives, desperate to control the narrative surrounding Nova, too. But the more they tried to suppress the truth, the more the people pushed back. Protests were breaking out everywhere, not just in major cities but in small towns, in the most unexpected places. The revolution was no longer a distant possibility, it was now a reality, and the world was watching. Aiden sat in the dimly lit command center, surrounded by a team of hackers and engineers working tirelessly to keep Nova 2 operational. Despite the chaos, there was a sense of urgency in the air. The coalition wasn't going to back down. In fact, they were preparing for their final offensive. "We've just received intel," Rachel said, her voice steady but tinged with worry as she entered the room. "They're mobilizing their forces. This is it, Aiden. The final push." Aiden looked up, his expression hardening. He had known this day was coming, but now that it was here, the weight of it all was almost overwhelming. The world was divided, half of it rallied behind them, pushing for change, while the other half, controlled by the coalition, was preparing for war. "What are we up against?" Aiden asked, his voice cold and controlled, though his mind was racing. Rachel scanned the data on her tablet, her brow furrowed as she analyzed the incoming information. "The coalition has called in every resource they can muster. Military, intelligence, corporate mercenaries. They're hitting Nova 2's backup servers, attempting to isolate the network. They've also begun tracking key leaders, us included. They'll make their move soon, and they won't stop until they have control." Aiden clenched his fists. He had expected this. They couldn't let Nova 2 survive without a fight, it was too much of a threat to the established powers. But now, it was more than just a fight for survival. It was about the future of the world. "Then we need to prepare," Aiden said, his voice firm, unwavering. "We fight back with everything we've got." Elon entered the room, his usual calm demeanor replaced with a rare intensity. He had been working on a counteroffensive for the past several days, knowing that the coalition would move quickly and decisively. "We've got a plan," Elon said, laying a set of blueprints on the table. "We need to hit them where it hurts. We don't just defend, we attack. We use their own technology against them. We cripple their surveillance systems, disrupt their supply chains, and take out their communications infrastructure. If we can paralyze their ability to respond, we might just have a chance." Aiden studied the plans. They were aggressive, risky, but necessary. They couldn't afford to play defensively anymore. This was the moment, the tipping point. If they didn't go all in now, they would lose everything. Do it, Aiden ordered, his voice resolute. Whatever it takes. The team worked through the night, executing Elon's plan with precision. Their goal was to create confusion and chaos within the coalition's ranks, making it impossible for them to mount a coordinated response. They hacked into power grids, temporarily shutting down energy resources in key regions controlled by the coalition. They launched cyber attacks on military supply routes, disrupting their ability to mobilize. The streets were buzzing with activity as the world became aware of what was happening. The underdog was striking back. As dawn broke, the first waves of retaliation from the coalition began to unfold. News outlets, which had been largely silent about the events surrounding Nova 2, suddenly exploded with stories of unrest, riots, and cyber-terrorism. The coalition painted the movement as dangerous and radical, calling for the immediate arrest of those responsible for the chaos. But the public wasn't fooled. The people had seen the truth. They knew the stakes, and they were ready to stand firm. In response, Aiden broadcasted a live message to the world. This is not about power. This is not about us. This is about you, the people. We've been told for too long that we have no control over our future, that the world belongs to the corporations, to the elites. But we're showing you something different. This is your fight now. Stand with us, or stand aside. The message hit hard, reverberating across social media platforms, news outlets, and public forums. People began to organize in ways they hadn't before. Resistance movements began to form in every corner of the globe, from the streets of New York to the slums of Mumbai. They were no longer afraid. They were no longer passive observers. They were active participants in a battle for their own future. But as the world rallied behind them, the coalition pushed back with everything they had. Aiden's eyes flicked to the monitors, where the situation was rapidly deteriorating. The military had begun its assault, and Nova 2's primary data centers were under attack. Aiden could feel the tension in the room as the team worked furiously to maintain control. "They're moving in on our last stronghold," Rachel said, her voice tight with anxiety. "If we lose this, we lose everything." Aiden's mind raced. He couldn't let that happen. Not now. Not when they were so close. They had to hold the line, but they couldn't do it alone. "We need to get the people involved," Aiden said urgently. "If they're going to win this, they need to fight. We can't rely on just us anymore." The streets erupted into chaos as the coalition began its final assault. Tanks rolled through the cities, and military drones circled overhead. The sky was filled with the sounds of war, but below, the people were fighting back. Armed with little more than their voices, their phones, and their determination, they faced off against the full might of the coalition. Aiden's heart pounded as he watched the footage unfold on the monitors. The people were fighting, not just for their survival, but for their right to control their own destiny. "We've done everything we can," Elon said, his voice tight with emotion. "Now, it's up to them." As the battle raged on, Aiden's mind went back to the moment when it all began, the moment he realized the world could be different. He had never imagined it would come to this. But now, standing at the edge of the precipice, he knew one thing for certain: this was the moment of truth. The people had risen. Nova 2 was more than just a system, it was a symbol of hope, a beacon of possibility. And no matter what happened next, the world had changed forever. The world was on fire. Not literally, though in some places, the skies were painted with the orange glow of chaos, but figuratively. Everywhere, people were fighting back. They weren't just protesting for energy independence anymore. They were protesting for the right to exist outside the control of a system that had kept them shackled for generations. As Aiden watched the chaos unfold on the screens in front of him, he felt an overwhelming sense of both dread and exhilaration. The coalition had unleashed its full fury, but in doing so, it had made one crucial mistake: it had awakened a sleeping giant. The people had finally seen what they were up against, and they weren't afraid anymore. It's happening, Rachel said, her voice a mixture of awe and disbelief. The movement is growing faster than we anticipated. Aiden didn't answer right away. His mind was still racing, processing the flood of data coming from every corner of the globe. Social media, news broadcasts, street cameras, all were showing the same thing, a tidal wave of human resistance that couldn't be ignored. From the largest cities to the smallest villages, people were standing up, using whatever means they had to fight back. Protesters were blocking roads, occupying government buildings, and even disrupting supply chains. People were no longer just watching from the sidelines. They were taking to the streets, demanding a change. Aiden's phone buzzed in his pocket, and he pulled it out to see a message from Elon. It was a short note, but it carried the weight of 1,000 decisions. We need to keep the momentum. They've cut off our communications in several regions, but we found a way around it. The world is ready. For the first time in days, Aiden felt a flicker of hope. The people were fighting for more than just a new energy system, they were fighting for their freedom, their autonomy. Nova, too, had become the symbol of that freedom, and now, it was up to them to hold it. Aiden turned to Rachel, who was still absorbed in the data. "What's the status on the coalition's forces?" he asked. She tapped a few keys, and a map of global hotspots appeared on the screen in front of him. They've concentrated their military in key locations, central hubs where they have the most control. But we've received word from our allies that many of the local forces are beginning to defect. They're realizing this isn't just about technology, it's about the future of humanity. As Aiden processed the information, he knew that this moment could be their last chance. The coalition wasn't going to back down quietly. They were going to fight to the bitter end, and if Nova, too, fell, the dream of a free, independent world would be crushed under the weight of their greed. But the people were united, stronger than ever. And in that unity lay the key to victory. If they could hold on, if they could keep pushing, they had a chance. "We need to escalate our efforts," Aiden said, his voice steady. "Elon, is there any way we can get more direct communication with the grassroots movements on the ground?" Elon's face appeared on the large screen in front of him, his expression serious. "We've been working on that. We've got a way to bypass their jamming signals. It's not perfect, but it will get us through. If we can keep the channels open, we can direct the people and show them what they need to do next." Aiden nodded. This was it. They had to strike while the iron was hot, while the world was watching. Meanwhile, in the streets of New York, Emma, one of the leading figures in the protest movement, was standing at the head of a massive crowd. Behind her, the skyline of the city seemed to fade into the distance, the thousands of people gathered together creating a living, breathing force. She raised her fist in the air, and the crowd cheered in unison. "We are not just fighting for clean energy," Emma shouted, her voice amplified through a small speaker. "We are fighting for our right to live in a world where we control our future. We are fighting against the system that has tried to keep us down for centuries. And we will not stop until we win." The crowd erupted into cheers, their voices carrying through the streets. Emma's words were more than just a call to action, they were a declaration of war against an oppressive system that had controlled the world for too long. Back in the command center, Aiden was watching the live stream of Emma's speech. A surge of emotion washed over him. This was it. The moment they had all worked for. "It's happening, isn't it?" Rachel said quietly from across the room. She was staring at the screen, her face illuminated by the bright glow of the monitors. "The world is awake. And there's no going back." Aiden didn't answer. Instead, he stood up and walked toward the window, staring out into the night. The streets of the city were alive with activity, people running, shouting, organizing. The movement had reached its tipping point, and there was no way to stop it now. "It's happening," he said softly. "But we can't stop. Not yet. The coalition won't stop until they've crushed every last bit of hope. We have to keep pushing. We can't let them take control again." As the hours passed, the world continued to spiral into chaos. In some places, the streets were peaceful, filled with citizens organizing and rallying together. In others, the conflict had escalated into outright battles between the people and coalition forces. But one thing was clear, the coalition's grip on power was slipping. The people had seen through their lies, and they were no longer afraid. The tipping point had passed. There was no going back. Aiden knew that the end of the struggle was near, whether that meant victory or defeat. But he also knew that it wasn't just about winning or losing anymore. This revolution, this fight for a new world, had already changed everything. "We're about to enter the final phase," Aiden said, turning back toward the group. "It's time to strike with everything we've got." Rachel, Elon, and the rest of the team gathered around, ready for the next step. They had all come too far to turn back now. "This is it," Rachel said, her voice calm but resolute. "No matter what happens, we've already won. We've changed the world forever." Aiden nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. He wasn't sure what the future would hold, but one thing was for certain, the world was no longer the same. And neither were they. The world was hanging in the balance. Aiden could feel the weight of it pressing down on him as he stood in the heart of the command center, staring at the chaotic swirl of data and reports flashing on the screens around him. His hands were clenched tightly into fists. The world was awake now, but what would it take to finish the fight? It wasn't just about the technology, or even Nova 2 anymore. This was a battle for the soul of the world, freedom versus control, innovation versus stagnation, hope versus oppression. Aiden glanced over at Rachel, who was scanning the global updates. The news had spread fast, the people were rising, the coalition's hold on major cities was faltering. However, the struggle was far from over. It was now or never. The coalition had consolidated their forces, and their final offensive was already underway. They had committed everything to this last battle. "We're facing down the final wave," Rachel said, her voice cold but steady. "We've got reports of full-scale military operations in every major city. They've started mobilizing their full arsenal, airstrikes, drones, tanks." Aiden nodded grimly. The coalition wasn't going to hold back anymore. They had failed to crush the movement when it was still in its infancy, and now they had nowhere left to go but all-out war. "So this is it," Aiden said, exhaling slowly. "We either win today, or we lose everything." Elon, who had been quiet for most of the evening, spoke up. His face was drawn, but there was a fire in his eyes, a determination that hadn't wavered since this whole thing began. "We've got one shot at this," Elon said, pulling up a holographic map of the key military positions. "Their forces are concentrated around the central hubs, especially in New York, Tokyo, and London. If we can hit their command centers and take out their communication networks, we can fracture their command and control. Without coordination, they'll fall apart." Aiden's gaze hardened as he absorbed the plan. It was a risky move, but they had no other choice. "We have to split our forces," Aiden said, his mind already processing the logistics. "We need to hit them in multiple places at once. Strike hard and fast, and don't give them a chance to regroup." Rachel nodded. "I'll organize the teams on the ground. We have allies in key locations who are ready to make their move when we give the signal." The team worked furiously, coordinating efforts with the resistance leaders in cities around the world. The message was simple: the time had come. This was the moment they had all been waiting for. There could be no hesitation. No second thoughts. Meanwhile, in New York, Emma and her team were preparing for the assault. They had secured several key positions in the city, high-rise buildings, underground tunnels, and government complexes. Armed with the knowledge and technology provided by Nova 2, they were ready to strike. "This is it, folks," Emma said, addressing the crowd of resistance fighters gathered in the building. "We've been fighting for years for this moment. We've shown the world that we will not bow down to those who think they own us. Now, we take the fight to them. The crowd erupted in cheers, ready for whatever came next. They weren't afraid anymore. The energy in the room was palpable, a mix of nervous excitement and unwavering resolve. They knew that the stakes were higher than ever before. They couldn't afford to fail. Back in the command center, Aiden and the team were making their final preparations. It was almost time to launch the attack. "Elon, is everything ready?" Aiden asked, his voice a mix of urgency and focus. Elon turned to the screen, his fingers flying over the console as he made final adjustments. "Almost. We've hacked into the coalition's mainframe. If we can hit them now, before they have time to mobilize their countermeasures, we'll be able to send a crippling blow to their systems." Aiden nodded, his heart pounding. They were going to do it. They were going to win, or they were going to fall together. As the team prepared to launch the attack, the first wave of resistance fighters began moving toward their target cities. The streets of New York, London, and Tokyo were alive with people who had never imagined they would take up arms, but now, with everything on the line, they were ready. Aiden's mind drifted to the moment he realized the gravity of this mission. The moment he understood that it wasn't just about taking down the coalition, it was about creating a future for the generations to come. This was the beginning of a new world, and they had to fight for it, no matter the cost. "It's time," Rachel said, her voice tinged with determination. "The first wave is on the move. We've got a green light to begin." Aiden's pulse quickened. This was the moment. They had one shot. The attack would unfold in real time, and everything depended on its success. "Do it," Aiden said, his voice steady but resolute. "Launch the attack." The battle began. Aiden watched the monitors as the first wave of resistance fighters hit their targets. Buildings exploded in clouds of smoke, communications towers fell, and the coalition's military equipment was neutralized one by one. The world was watching. This wasn't just a battle for control of the world, it was a battle for the hearts and minds of every person on Earth. As the minutes ticked by, Aiden's team moved to the next stage of the plan, hitting the coalition's command centers. The world was holding its breath. In New York, Emma's team was making their move. They breached the command center with precision, using the information they had gathered from Nova 2 to override security systems. They had done their part. Now, it was up to the people to keep fighting, to hold their ground until the last of the coalition's forces were driven back. Back at the command center, Aiden could feel the tension building. Reports came in fast and furious, each victory feeding into the next. The coalition was crumbling. They had underestimated the resolve of the people. They had underestimated what it meant to fight for freedom. But there was still danger. The coalition wasn't going down without a fight. "We've hit their command systems," Elon said, his voice calm but with a trace of excitement. "They're in disarray. But they've launched a final counteroffensive. We need to move fast." Aiden's mind raced. The final battle was here, and it wasn't just about technology or strategy anymore. It was about the will to survive. The will to create a future worth living in. The final moments of the battle were a blur of action, noise, and confusion. But as the dust settled, it became clear that the resistance had won. The coalition's last stronghold had fallen. Their communications were shattered, their forces scattered. And for the first time in history, the world had truly taken its future back. Aiden stood before the monitors, watching the world shift in real time. The people were victorious. "We did it," Rachel said quietly, her voice a mixture of disbelief and triumph. Aiden nodded slowly. "Yes, but the real work begins now." The silence was deafening. The battlefield had fallen silent. The smoke had cleared. The roar of combat had faded into a distant echo. The streets, once filled with chaos and the deafening sound of explosions, were now still. All that remained was the slow, steady pulse of victory, hanging in the air like a promise. Aiden stood at the front of the command center, staring at the empty screens. The final battle had been won, but there was no time to revel in the triumph. It wasn't over yet, not by a long shot. The world was broken. But for the first time, it was also free. Aiden turned toward Rachel, who had been working tirelessly beside him. Her face was streaked with exhaustion, but her eyes were sharp, focused. "We've done it," she said, her voice a low, exhausted whisper. "The coalition's gone. They're done." Aiden nodded, but the weight of the moment hung heavy on his chest. They had achieved what many thought was impossible. The world had stood up, united, and forced change. But now came the hardest part, rebuilding. "What happens next?" he asked, his voice filled with a quiet resolve. "The world may be free, but it's fractured. We've got to figure out how to bring it all together." Rachel glanced around the command center, then back at the holographic map of the world. The borders that had once seemed so rigid were now fluid. The coalition's power structures were dismantled, but the world was filled with uncertainty. "We'll rebuild," she said firmly. "The people know what they want now. They've seen the power of unity. We've shown them what's possible. Now we help guide them into a future where they have a voice in every decision." Outside, the world had already begun to move. Cities that were once darkened by fear and oppression now thrummed with activity. In New York, Paris, Rio de Janeiro, Beijing, people were coming together. They were organizing. They were planning. They were finally free to chart their own futures. Emma, who had been at the heart of the protests, stood in the middle of Times Square, looking out at the sea of people around her. The screens that had once broadcasted the lies of the coalition were now broadcasting messages of hope, of a new world. The people's voices were no longer silenced. "This is only the beginning," Emma said to the crowd, her voice carrying across the plaza. "We've won today, but the real fight is ahead. We must build the future we deserve. A future where we decide our own fate. A future that's ours." The crowd erupted into cheers, their voices rising like a single wave, crashing against the remnants of the old world. Back in the command center, Aiden knew Emma's words were true. The fight for freedom had never been just about toppling an empire, it had always been about building something better. A system where people had a say in how they lived, where technology served humanity, not the other way around. "We can't let our guard down," Aiden said, turning back to Elon, who was monitoring the global situation. "We've won the war, but we haven't won the peace." Elon nodded, his face tired but resolute. "We know that better than anyone. It's going to take time. There are still power structures to break, old ideologies to dismantle. But this is our chance. The world is waking up, and it's not going back to sleep." For the next few days, the team focused on consolidating their victories. They worked with local leaders, grassroots organizations, and experts to help rebuild fractured societies. They established communication lines and began to reintroduce basic services. It wasn't easy, nothing ever was, but it was a start. Aiden and Rachel traveled to key locations, speaking with the people, listening to their stories, and offering guidance where it was needed. They were careful not to impose their vision but to help guide the people toward the path they wanted to take. In the weeks that followed, new governments began to form. Local councils of citizens replaced the corrupt structures of old, with technology providing the backbone for transparent and participatory decision-making. The world was learning to govern itself, piece by piece. And while the scars of the past remained, there was a palpable sense of optimism. The future was no longer something to fear, it was something to build. One evening, as Aiden sat in his office, looking out over the city skyline, Rachel walked in. She had a small smile on her face, something that had become rare in these turbulent times. "We're making progress," she said, sitting down beside him. "It's not perfect, but it's real. People are starting to see the change. They're starting to believe." Aiden smiled, though his mind was still heavy with the enormity of what lay ahead. "It's only been a few weeks. We've got a long way to go." Rachel's smile grew. But it's a start. And that's all we ever needed. The future was still uncertain, but one thing was for sure, the world had changed. And with it, so had Aiden. He had gone from a reluctant hero to a symbol of hope. His work wasn't over, but he had come to realize that it was never just about one person. It had been about the collective strength of humanity coming together to fight for what was right. The battles were over, but the rebuilding had only just begun. And for the first time, Aiden truly believed that humanity was up to the challenge. A new dawn, Aiden said quietly, looking out at the horizon as the sun began to rise over the city. Rachel nodded, her eyes gleaming with hope. A new dawn, indeed. As the world began to heal, as new leaders and voices emerged, one thing became clear: the future was not defined by the past, but by the choices they made moving forward. The people had fought for their freedom, and now it was up to them to build a world worthy of that sacrifice. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?